Only 12 people in that audience knew who Bruce Lee actually was. The karate champion on stage certainly didn't. The tournament officials didn't. The judges didn't. 500 spectators packed into the bleachers of the International Karate Championships had no idea that the small man, sitting quietly in row 14, was about to become the reason this tournament was remembered for the next 50 years. In the next 8 minutes, the most arrogant champion in American karate was going to learn the most humbling lesson of his career. And nobody in that building would ever forget it. This is the story, as it has been told and retold in martial arts circles for decades. Long Beach, California, spring 1969. Saturday afternoon, the sun cutting through the high windows of the arena at an angle that made everything on the competition floor look faintly cinematic, whether anyone intended it that way or not. The tournament had been running since morning, preliminaries, quarterfinals, the slow grinding attrition of a serious competition working its way toward the divisions that actually mattered. By the time the heavyweight finals approached, the crowd had thickened considerably, drawn in by word that this year's favorite was once again on pace to make history. The Long Beach Arena sat at three-quarters capacity by early afternoon, the kind of crowd that only gathers when something genuinely important is happening. This wasn't a movie premiere or a boxing match. This was the International Karate Championships, at the time, the single biggest gathering of serious martial artists in the country. Competitors had flown in from a dozen countries. 20 different styles were represented on the mat that weekend. Shotokan, Goju-Ryu, Wado-Ryu, Kyokushin, Tang-Soo-Do, Kempo. If you trained seriously anywhere in America in 1969, there was a good chance someone you respected was fighting in Long Beach that day. The air inside carried the specific smell of every serious tournament: sweat, liniment, canvas, and the electric tension of 500 people who understood exactly what they were watching. Judges barked point calls in Japanese. Ki shouts cracked through the room every few seconds. This was, as far as the American martial arts scene was concerned, close to the Olympics. On the competition floor, warming up for the heavyweight finals, was the man everyone had come to see. Michael Chun, though almost nobody in that arena knew his birth name, because he'd changed it years earlier to something that sounded, in his own words, more marketable. 28 years old, 6'2", 215 pounds of pure, disciplined muscle. He'd been training since he was 6, 22 years in the art. 4th-degree black belt in Shotokan Karate. 3-time defending champion of this exact tournament. 47 consecutive wins. 5 years without a single loss. He was, by any measure that mattered in that room, the best fighter most of those 500 people had ever seen in person. And he knew it. His confidence didn't just border on arrogance. It had crossed that line years ago and built a house there. He'd started training at 6 years old in a strip mall dojo his father drove him to 3 times a week. And by the time he was a teenager, the discipline had stopped being something done to him and become something he did to everyone else instead. Every trophy on his shelf, every article written about his winning streak, every student who bowed a little lower when he walked past, all of it had built a version of Michael Chun who genuinely believed, without a shred of performance in the belief, that he had found the ceiling of human combative skill, and that ceiling happened to be shaped exactly like traditional Japanese karate. Michael stood center stage in a spotless white GI, black belt tied with parade ground precision, throwing warm-up strikes that snapped the air with the crisp, textbook sound of somebody who had drilled the same technique 10,000 times. The crowd watched him the way crowds watch someone who has clearly earned the right to be watched. Before the finals began, tournament tradition called for the champion to take the microphone. A few words to set the tone, motivate the room, remind everyone why they'd shown up. Michael took it eagerly. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow competitors. His voice carried easily through the arena speakers, confident, commanding. I stand here today as your 3-time champion. 47 consecutive victories. 5 years undefeated. Respectful applause. Expected. Earned. I have proven, he continued, that traditional Japanese karate is the most effective fighting system in the world. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Martial arts politics in 1969 were delicate. Different countries, different lineages, different pride. But Michael was the champion. He bought himself the right to make bold claims. Then he made a mistake that would follow him for the rest of his career. "I want to address something," he said, "that's been bothering me. This recent trend of so-called Kung Fu. Chinese martial arts, flowery movements, unrealistic techniques." The room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet right before something happens. Kung Fu is not real martial arts. It's performance. It's dance. It's movie choreography. It has no practical application in real fighting. In row 14, a small man in plain street clothes shifted slightly in his seat. The martial artist sitting beside him, a friend who recognized exactly who he was, leaned over and murmured something like a warning. The small man shook his head. He kept watching. Michael wasn't finished. "In fact, I'll make it easy. I challenge any Kung Fu practitioner, any Chinese martial artist, to come up here right now and prove me wrong." Silence. 500 people understanding, almost in unison, that a champion publicly challenging an entire style from a microphone was not normal tournament etiquette. It was something closer to an insult thrown at a room full of strangers. Michael scanned the crowd, smiling now, enjoying himself. "That's what I thought. All talk. No substance. I'll accept your challenge." The voice came from row 14. Quiet, level, but the arena's sound system was sensitive enough to pick it up, and every one of the 500 people in that building heard it clearly. Michael squinted toward the seats, the stage lights making it hard to see past the front rows. "Excuse me. I said I'll accept your challenge." A small man stood up. Plain black shirt, plain black pants. No GI, no belt, no patch identifying a school or a rank. He looked, to every eye in that arena, like a spectator who had wandered onto the wrong side of an argument. "You practice Kung Fu?" Michael asked. "Chinese martial arts, yes. Wing Chun. And my own system, Jeet Kune Do." Michael had never heard of Jeet Kune Do. Wing Chun, vaguely, some close-range Southern style. Neither name meant anything to him. "And your name?" "Bruce Lee." The name landed on most of the room like static, meaningless noise. Michael didn't follow Hong Kong cinema. He'd never seen The Green Hornet. He had no idea that the man walking down through the bleachers toward the stage was already, in certain circles, one of the most talked about martial artists in America. A man whose private students included some of the most dangerous fighters on the West Coast, and whose reputation for speed had already reached mythical proportions among the small handful of people who'd actually trained with him. But 12 people in that arena knew exactly who he was. One of them, sitting beside Bruce, was Dan Inosanto, his close friend and training partner, who leaned in one more time as Bruce stood up. "You don't have to do this." He challenged the style. Bruce said quietly, "I'm answering for it." The walk to the stage. Bruce made his way down through the bleachers. People shifted aside to let him pass, and the 12 who recognized him began whispering to their neighbors. "That's Bruce Lee, the Green Hornet guy, the one who does the impossible speed demonstrations," and the whisper spread in widening rings the way real information always beats rumor to the punch, but only barely. He reached the stage, climbed the steps, and now, under the competition lighting, everyone in the arena could finally see him clearly. 5'7", maybe 140 pounds. Street clothes. No visible muscle mass that screamed fighter the way Michael's build did. Michael towered over him by 7 inches and outweighed him by roughly 75 pounds. A physical mismatch so visually stark that the murmur running through the crowd wasn't cruelty, so much as genuine disbelief. This is who answered the challenge. Michael, for his part, was fighting to keep a straight face. He'd expected some older Chinese instructor, gray-haired, credentialed, dignified. Instead, he was looking at a slim young man in plain clothes who, if anything, looked like he'd wandered in from a parking lot. "You're sure you want to do this?" Michael asked, not out of concern, but the kind of theatrical generosity a champion offers when he's certain of the outcome. "I'm sure," Bruce said. The tournament's chief official, a respected figure in the American karate scene who happened to be standing near the stage, took the microphone to explain the situation to the crowd. For those who don't know, this is Bruce Lee. He teaches Wing Chun and his own system in Los Angeles. Some of you may know him from television. He played Kato on The Green Hornet. A few people in the crowd nodded, placing the face now. Michael, if anything, relaxed further. An actor. That explained everything. Choreographed movie fighting. Fake. Exactly the kind of kung fu. He just spent 2 minutes tearing apart. This will be a light, controlled demonstration, the official announced. We're showing the differences between styles, not trying to hurt anyone. Understood. Both men nodded, but Michael had already decided, privately, that he was going to press harder than light. He wanted to make a point. He wanted this actor to look foolish in front of 500 witnesses, and he intended to make sure the lesson landed. The demonstration. They faced each other center stage. Michael dropped into a deep, textbook Shotokan front stance, Zenkutsudachi. Weight forward, front fist chambered, the picture of proper form from a man who'd spent 2 decades perfecting exactly this posture. Bruce simply stood, feet roughly shoulder-width apart, weight centered, hands loose and slightly raised. Nothing that resembled a fighting stance to eyes trained in traditional karate. To half the room, it looked less like readiness and more like carelessness. The signal to begin was given. Michael moved first, a lunging front hand punch, oisuki, textbook form, genuinely fast for a man his size. It found nothing but air. Bruce had shifted just enough, a fraction of a step, and the strike passed through the space he'd occupied a half-second earlier. Michael reset immediately and tried again, a front snap kick to the midsection. Same result. Bruce wasn't there. Not blocking, not retreating dramatically, just not there, having already moved with what looked like almost no effort at all. The crowd's confusion deepened. Michael was executing clean, powerful, correct technique, the exact techniques that had won him 47 consecutive fights, and none of it was landing. Bruce wasn't even defending in any way the room recognized. He was simply somewhere else by the time each strike arrived. Michael picked up the pace, chaining combinations together. Punch, punch, kick, reverse punch, roundhouse. The exact sequences that had ended dozens of matches in his favor. Bruce moved through all of it like water finding the gaps between rocks. Under one strike, outside the next, away from the kick. Always a half step ahead, as if he already knew where the technique was going before Michael's body had fully committed to it. The reason, though nobody watching could have named it in the moment, was simple. Every classical strike carries a tell, a chamber, a weight shift, a wind-up that announces its own arrival a fraction of a second before it lands. Bruce wasn't reacting to Michael's punches. He was reading the setup and acting before the punch even existed. Frustration crept into Michael's face. He'd thrown clean technique after clean technique and touched nothing. His pride, 5 years of undefeated pride, started pushing him past the light contact agreement. He wanted to land something, even lightly, just to prove the point he'd made from the microphone. He committed to a hard front thrust kick, real intent behind it this time. Bruce's hand rose to meet it, not blocking, but intercepting, redirecting the kick just enough, just before full extension, to push it a few inches off its line. In that same motion, Bruce stepped inside, well within range now, and his hand shot forward toward Michael's centerline, stopping, deliberately, an inch from his face. The message needed no translation. That could have landed. It didn't because I chose that. Michael stepped back, breathing harder now, genuinely frustrated. This wasn't supposed to happen. He reset into a deeper stance, and threw everything he had. The full arsenal that had made him a 3-time champion. Punches, kicks, elbows, sweeps. Bruce moved through the barrage like smoke, occasionally letting his hands brush a passing strike, just enough to demonstrate that he could have stopped it entirely if he'd wanted to. Somewhere around the 15-second mark, a low murmur started moving through the bleachers, not commentary exactly. More like 500 people quietly recalibrating in unison. The practitioners in the crowd, the ones who trained seriously themselves, were the first to notice what was actually happening. Michael wasn't being outmuscled. He wasn't even being outmaneuvered in any way that showed up as flashy or theatrical. He was simply, consistently, arriving a half-second late to a fight that had already moved somewhere else. Every technique he threw was clean. Every technique found empty air. The gap between those two facts was what was making the room go quiet. 30 seconds of this. The room had gone almost silent. Not the silence of boredom, but the silence of 500 serious martial artists watching something they didn't have a category for yet. Then Bruce decided to end it. Michael threw a high roundhouse kick, committing his weight fully, aiming for the head. Bruce didn't evade this one. He stepped inside the arc of the kick, where the technique had no power left, controlling Michael's leg at the knee with one hand while his other hand rose in a straight line to Michael's throat, stopping exactly 1 inch away. Extended. Perfectly placed. 1 more inch in the fight, the real fight, if there had been one, would have been over completely. Bruce held the position for 3 full seconds, long enough for every person in that arena to understand exactly what they were looking at. Then he released, stepped back, and gave Michael room. The silence after. Michael stood there breathing hard, sweat running down his face, his ego in pieces. He had just spent nearly a full minute throwing his best, most decorated techniques against a man 75 pounds lighter. A man he'd publicly dismissed as a movie actor doing fake martial arts and hadn't landed a single clean strike. The silence in the arena was the specific silence of 500 people who had just watched their assumptions get quietly dismantled. The tournament official stepped in to fill the gap. Gentlemen, that was an excellent demonstration of 2 very different approaches to martial arts. Let's give both competitors a round of applause. The crowd erupted, not polite applause, but the real thing, the sound people make when they know they've witnessed something genuinely rare. Michael bowed, stiff but sincere, his pride wounded but his integrity intact. He extended his hand. Bruce took it. "I underestimated you," Michael said. "You have excellent technique." Bruce replied, "Excellent form, but technique alone isn't enough. You were fighting the way you were taught, following the pattern, the kata. Real combat doesn't follow patterns. You have to be water." Michael had heard the phrase before, secondhand, as one of those things people said Bruce Lee liked to say. He hadn't understood it. Standing there, catching his breath, he began to. What came after? At the request of the tournament's officials, Bruce spent the next 15 minutes giving the crowd an impromptu breakdown of what they'd just seen, explaining Wing Chun's centerline theory, the principle of economy of motion, why traditional deep stances sacrifice mobility for power in a way that doesn't always serve a real, unscripted confrontation. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He said as much directly to the room. Karate was an excellent discipline, an excellent foundation for character and conditioning. But style, any style, becomes a limitation the moment it's treated as the whole answer rather than one tool among many. Some in the audience bristled. Years of tradition being gently but publicly questioned rarely goes down easily. Others leaned forward, genuinely hungry for a different way of thinking about what they'd spent years training. Michael went on to win his 4th consecutive championship that same afternoon. His technique hadn't gotten worse. If anything, something in his approach seemed to loosen, to breathe differently for the rest of the tournament. Afterward, in the parking lot as the arena emptied into the evening, Michael found Bruce beside his car. "Mr. Lee, can we talk?" They sat on the hood together as the light faded. "I've been thinking about what you said," Michael admitted. "About being water. About adapting. I want to learn what you showed today. Would you teach me?" Bruce studied him for a moment, the sincerity in it, not performance this time. "I don't take many students. My schedule is full. But I'll give you a chance. Saturday mornings, my school in Los Angeles. We'll see if you're serious." Michael showed up that Saturday, and the one after. For nearly 2 years, the man once introduced from a tournament podium as an undefeated karate champion trained quietly alongside Bruce Lee, absorbing Wing Chun principles and the early philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, unlearning the rigid edges of a system he'd once called unbeatable. He kept competing. He kept winning. But those who watched him fight in that period noticed something different in how he moved, looser, more responsive, less committed to a single, predictable script. Those 2 years weren't easy ones. Michael arrived at that first Saturday session still carrying, whether he admitted it or not, the muscle memory of 22 years spent training a certain way. Deep stances built for scoring points under a specific rule set, techniques drilled for how a judge would see them rather than how they'd hold up against someone who refused to fight by the same rules. Unlearning that took longer than learning it had. There were mornings he left frustrated, having spent 2 hours failing to do something that should, by every instinct he'd built over 2 decades, have been simple. But he kept showing up, and slowly the frustration turned into something closer to curiosity. And the curiosity eventually turned into a version of his own karate that moved differently, freer, more responsive, willing to abandon a beautiful technique the instant it stopped working rather than trusting it out of habit. He retired from competition in 1971, undefeated in his final year, and became an instructor himself, teaching a blended system that honored both the discipline he'd built his name on and the lesson he'd learned the hard way, in front of 500 strangers, from a man he'd mistaken for an actor. He told the story to his own students for the rest of his teaching career, not as a story about losing, as a story about the day his arrogance met something it couldn't explain away, and about the difference between being the best in your system and simply being the best. 12 who knew, 500 who remembered. Of the 500 people in that arena, only 12 had known who Bruce Lee was when he stood up in row 14. By the time he walked back out into the Long Beach evening, every single one of them did. Word moved through the American martial arts community the way important things move through communities built on word of mouth and reputation, quickly and with growing intensity. Some who told the story later exaggerated it, the way legends always accumulate detail with distance. Some dismissed it outright, unwilling to believe a man that size could dismantle a 4-year, 47-fight undefeated champion without landing a single hard strike. But the people who were actually there, the ones who felt the specific quiet that fell over that arena in the space between Michael's challenge and Bruce's answer, remembered it differently. Not as a fight, as a lesson, delivered without cruelty, by a man who never once raised his voice or his fists in anger, to a room full of people who thought they already understood what mastery looked like. 500 witnesses, 8 minutes, one demonstration that outlived every trophy handed out that day. In the decades since, the story has traveled well beyond the martial arts community that first carried it, retold in interviews, biographies, documentaries, and the countless conversations that happen in dojos whenever a student gets a little too confident in their own record. Details shift depending on who's telling it. Some versions compress the 15-minute lesson afterward into a single sentence. Some versions leave out the 2 years of Saturday morning training entirely, preferring the cleaner, punchier ending where the champion simply loses and the story stops there. That's what happens to a good story over enough retellings. It gets sanded down to its sharpest edges, but the core of it has never really changed, no matter who's doing the telling. A man built an entire identity around being the best in his system, said so in front of 500 people, and discovered, without a single hard strike being thrown at him, that being the best in a system and being genuinely, universally effective are not always the same thing. He was given that lesson by someone with every physical disadvantage the room could see, and none of the ones that actually mattered. It's the kind of story that keeps circulating in martial arts culture not because it's about who won a fight. Nobody in that arena would have called what happened a fight, in any conventional sense, but because it's about what happens when confidence outgrows its foundation, and what it costs, and what can be built afterward if the person on the receiving end is humble enough to sit down on a car hood in a parking lot and ask to learn. That's the story of the afternoon an undefeated karate champion challenged Kung Fu from a tournament microphone, and the small man in row 14 stood up to answer for it.